Ah, Miami. A haven for the finer things in life. Sun, surf, putting your toes in the sand. You know, there are worse places to be tracking down the nursing home attendant who seduced your grandma and cut you out of the will. I'll find you, Francisco. But I wasn't just here for pleasure. In recent years, a migration of professionals from states like New York and California have turned Miami into a burgeoning hub of finance and tech. Some have embraced the change, including city leadership that have hailed a new era for Miami as the Wall Street of the South or America's Switzerland. But others have seen it as the latest example of Miami pricing out its longtime residents in favor of the ultra-wealthy, a trend that tarnishes the city's culture and heightens inequality. It was high time someone got to the bottom of this, and that someone was gonna be me. So I spruced up on my Espanol, sprayed on a thick coat of SPF 250, and called up some friends who were Miami natives, because Dan Toomey was about to tackle Vice City. Bienvenido a Miami. Fresh off of the tarmac, my tummy started rumbling for the flavors of Latin cuisine. Of course, my virgin tongue has never experienced anything spicier than Hellmann's lighter-than-light squeezy mayo. But if I wanted to find out what was really going on here, I was gonna have to blend in. So I started off my sleuthing with a trip to La Carreta in Little Havana, where I met with culture reporter Carlos Frías to learn more about the city's history. Needless to say, I was fitting right in.
Mira, estamos haciendo un programa de televisión que tienen estos muchachos y yo soy de aquí y voy a ordenar unas cuantas cositas para que ellos lo prueben. No tenga miedo.
This is our first interview. We're here, so why pick this restaurant?
Well, I mean, look at it. This is actually the cultural meeting places of Miami. Miami is, it's 125, 150 years old as like an established place. It was pretty much a cow town where you would get things shipped up to Tampa, which back in the day was like the more important city, like before 1900.
Tampa was?
Yeah.
Oh, what a shit time that must have been.
Since the turn of the 20th century, Miami has been reshaped by waves of immigrants coming into the city. In the early 1900s, it was black Bahamians that built the beginnings of modern Miami. By the 1950s and 60s, Cubans fleeing the Castro regime arrived in the city. And over the next few decades, immigrants from all over the Caribbean and Latin America settled here, often in search of an alternative to political or economic turmoil at home. You can observe the impact of the city's immigration waves by simply looking at a map of the place. Little Havana, Little Haiti, Little Bahamas, and Little Santo Domingo in the Alapata neighborhood are all distinct areas with distinct cultures.
So that's kind of at the basis, is Miami's always getting remade by different groups that are affecting the culture of the place. And so that means it's always trying to redefine its identity.
And today, there's a new group of immigrants docking their ships in Miami's harbors, tossing their own spice into the city's cultural stew. But instead of Havana, they hail from Manhattan's Hudson Yards Equinox Gym Spa Hotel. Ladies and gentlemen, tech and finance have entered the chat.
Miami is having its tech moment.
The goal of turning Miami into the new Silicon Valley is a push from City Mayor Francis Suarez.
Big investors are moving to Miami.
Ken Griffin is moving both Citadel and Citadel Securities to Miami.
Oh, fuck yeah. We are so back. If there has been any group to define this sinking city's recent history, it's been the bros and hoes of tech and finance. From some of the richest people on the planet to founders hoping to fund their startup over drinks at Art Basel. All this really took flight during the pandemic, a time where more Americans moved to Florida than any other state. And this was encouraged by Florida's lax COVID policies. While other states closed their borders and required isolation, Florida welcomed transplants with open, tan, unvaxxed arms. And with them came the moolah.
I mean, we had so much money coming here from California and from New York, and a lot of this is like dovetails with COVID, right?
Danny Rivero is a reporter for Miami's public radio station WLRN.
And people were moving around the country and whatnot too, but the mayor said, come here.
And boy, did they come. During the heat of the pandemic, members of the tech and finance community flocked to South Florida like a squadron of pelicans. We know this because they tweeted a lot about it.
It was an entire burgeoning subgenre on Twitter of what I called like science fiction revisionism about Miami. People who were coming down here, who've been here for like 2 weeks, were like, guys, like that's how every fucking tweet would begin. Guys, comma, or like ellipses, like no traffic, great hospitality, outstanding government. I'm like, what are they describing? So all of us who've lived here for literally ever are trying to understand how people who have been here for 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months want to like man-bro-splain to us what Miami is.
Were you tweeting back at them too?
I was the only one.
Billy Corben is a documentarian and commentator who hosts the Because Miami podcast. After hearing him talk about the city on something called the Joseph Rogan Experience, I decided he was ready for a big-time interview with Dan Man himself, a decision I immediately regretted.
You're the whitest person I have ever met. Really. You're the same color as your shirt. When I first met you, I thought you wanted to tell me about this wonderful book. I just like...
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Is that it?
Yeah. It's like me, I'm roasting you and you're still this white.
Right.
It's unbelievable.
Right. You got any others?
No.
No? You sure?
I do.
You want to invite anybody else in on this?
Yes.
Clearly, Billy was confusing me for some white guy. But nevertheless, as a native Miamian, Billy's tone towards the city's finance and tech spats was far from flattering.
Arroz con mango literally means mango and rice. But what it means in kind of Cuban Spanish slang is clusterfuck. And so I referred, when the tech bros started moving to Miami during the pandemic, during 2020, I referred to them as the Arroz con Man Bros. The jokes are funnier when I explain them.
Perhaps the most arroz of these man bros was none other than Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami who became the figurehead for the movement to turn the city into a commerce hub. It was on December 4th, 2020, when venture capitalist Delian Asparohov tweeted about moving Silicon Valley to Miami, and Suarez responded with a simple, "How can I help?" Then came media appearances, more tweets, and soon a billboard in San Francisco, dragooning tech employees to get their glue-colored skin and bad posture down to South Beach stat.
As a mayor of Miami, he doesn't have a lot of power. The power is at the county. He's the mayor of the city. A lot of people get that confused, and that makes the mayor of Miami seem like a much bigger deal than he really is. But he has done a phenomenal job of promotion, right? Like, that is almost the extent of his power.
One of the main vehicles for that promotion was the Hobbit-entrancing fluff money of cryptocurrency. In 2021, Miami launched a fully fledged assault to become the crypto capital of America. The Miami Heat renamed their stadium FTX Arena. Mayor Suarez announced that he would take his first paycheck in Bitcoin. Miami also minted its own cryptocurrency called Miami Coin and even installed a crypto bull downtown to compete with New York's Wall Street Bull.
The crypto bull is right in downtown at Miami-Dade College, right over the bridge from here. You can go visit it, but it is in fact a crypto steer because it has no balls.
It doesn't have any balls?
No, so it's not a bull.
They didn't put, the whole point of the bull is the balls.
Right.
Needless to say, I had to confirm that this bull was ballsless. No ball sack in sight. Side quest completed.
Side quest completed.
And even though a lot of this crypto hype ended up vanishing into the night, Miami's great corporate offensive was actually pretty successful in luring the financial class to the city. Since 2020, Blackstone, Goldman Sachs, Icon Capital Management, Peter Thiel's Founders Fund, and hedge fund manager Ken Griffin's Citadel have all relocated offices to Miami. Between 2021 and 2022, an estimated $6 billion in annual income arrived in Miami-Dade County alone. Now, rich people moving to Florida isn't a new trend. For generations, the wealths have flocked to these beaches in search of good weather and strippers to pay pig.
Rich people have always bought their 4th, 5th, and 6th homes in Miami. What I'm saying is that that's nothing new. Rich people moving to Florida and South Florida, whether it's as a tax shelter or haven or get out of paying state income taxes elsewhere, or it's just the weather.
A lot of wealthy people suddenly found themselves having to pay more taxes in certain states, particularly in New York City.
Deborah Acosta reports on Florida real estate for the Wall Street Journal.
And so you're talking about like chefs of industry, right? Like the titans of industry, Carl Icahn, people like that were already making their way down here before the pandemic hit.
Florida's tax laws are famously quite nice to the ultra-wealthy and corporations. There's no state income tax, capital gains tax, or estate tax, meaning you can cash out on stock tax-free and also inherit wealth and property tax-free. Plus, the corporate tax rate is relatively low at just 5.5%. Meanwhile, the Biden administration and many individual states are doing their darndest to combat America's record-breaking wealth inequality by trying to tax the very richest people in our country more. So the sunny shores of Florida are looking nicer than ever if you're one of them richies. Like this fella.
Jeff Bezos switching coasts, the founder of Amazon.com, taking his talents to Miami.
That's right. Earlier this year, none other than Jeff Bezos got one step closer to completing his transformation into Pitbull by moving back to Miami where he grew up. However, it doesn't take an investigative journalist to crunch the numbers on this one and conclude that sentimental ain't the only kind of value Jeff is gaining here. And thank God, by the way, because I am not an investigative journalist. I'm actually two curious little aliens whose ship crashed on Earth and took shelter inside of this human trench coat. We're extremely interested in the dysfunction of your planet's financial system, and we look forward to probing Mr. Wonderful. Back in 2022, Washington State implemented a 7% tax on capital gains over $250,000 per year. That was the same year that Bezos stopped selling Amazon stock, which he had been doing annually since the 90s. Then this year, after he touched down in the 305, Bezos filed paperwork to sell 50 million shares worth over $8 billion at the time of filing, saving him at least $600 million in taxes on the sale, which, for what it's worth, covers the cost of his new 417-foot super yacht. Jeff now has multiple properties over here at Indian Creek Island. This dollop of land, also known as Billionaire Bunker, is home to people like Carl Icahn, Tom Brady, and Jared Kushner, and is only accessible via a guarded bridge. Soon after this moment, I was sniped by a tranquilizer dart to the penis. This island is ground zero for the extreme wealth that's moved into the city. Today, the 5 wealthiest property owners on Indian Creek now controlled a combined fortune of about $191 billion. For the people on Indian Creek, this tax deal in Florida is mucho primo. But for everyone else, it's not mucho, and even less primo.
We find that Florida is actually the worst in terms of having a tax system that increases inequality. A tax system where the less you earn, the more you pay, and the more you earn, the less you pay.
Amy Hanauer is the executive director of the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, a nonprofit that researches how to create more equitable tax systems.
The bottom fifth of taxpayers in Florida, people earning less than $20,000 a year, pay 5 times more of their income in state and local taxes than the top 1% in the state, people earning an average of $3.3 million a year. You know, and it's not just the lowest income either. Like for the bottom 40% of earners, you pay a higher tax rate in Florida than you do in the rest of the country on average. Does that sound fair to you? Like, let that soak in.
Sorry, can't hear you over the sound of my $20 rooftop marg, Amy. Fun numbers, though. The outsized tax burden on the lower and middle class is just one of the things making it increasingly difficult for everyday Miamians to afford to live there anymore. South Florida has the second worst inflation rate of any metropolitan area in the U.S., and the state as a whole has car insurance prices that are 55% higher than the national average. And to take a step back, Miami already had one of the worst wealth gaps in the country, even before half of Goldman's equity traders schlepped their banker bags down here. These historical trends, combined with the more recent wave of professionals moving in, has caused Miami's luxury real estate market to explode, putting a huge strain on the county's housing system.
Developers were already building a bunch of rental housing, and as things started ratcheting up in Miami, it suddenly became almost unaffordable for them to do middle income or lower income housing because the land became so expensive. Just all the tremendous amount of capital that has made its way down here, it's insane, really.
A big swath of the new luxury demand is being driven by hedge fund employees whose firms have relocated. One Sotheby's agent recently said that most of the luxury homes he sold in summer 2023 were to hedge fund buyers, about half of which were Citadel employees.
And so it creates a problem, obviously, for the middle and lower classes to find housing in this area, despite the fact that there's so many jobs. We actually have the lowest unemployment rate in the entire country right now. We have all these jobs, but we don't have houses to put all these people in to do the jobs.
Not to mention that if you are one of the lucky few who's able to buy a home, finding insurance is another can of worms.
So it's become pretty intense. So many insurers have exited, and it's created a really tough situation for a lot of people who actually, like, if you own your home outright, often what people do is that they just drop their insurance altogether.
And they're just living without insurance.
They're living without insurance. What they're doing, a lot of them, is they're saving money on their own.
Now, it would be easy to pin this housing crisis on all the hedge fund middle managers who just want to live in tropical Westchester. But wealthy people wanting to live in nice neighborhoods isn't new, and it certainly isn't unique to Miami. What is unique to Miami is that unlike the cities it's often compared to, there's little infrastructure or policy in place to maintain a baseline level of affordable housing.
Wall Street exists in New York City, which has vast housing policies. They have rent control. They have, tons of subsidized housing. I mean, a lot of people would argue they need more, but they have like actual structure and policies around these things. Singapore, the government is very involved in making sure that people have a place to live. They have policies beefing this up and making it so that you're not left assed out on the street.
And you're saying Miami does not?
We have, we do not have that. That's not in the DNA of what we do here. Not to say there's nothing going on. The county government, especially, has been pumping a lot of new money into developments, but it's all on the private market. The local government retains no ownership. It's nothing compared to any of these other cities that we're talking about.
Which is how we arrive at Miami's fundamental problem today. It is a city with an unquenchable thirst for growth, but it doesn't have the land, the policy, or the infrastructure to keep growing sustainably.
Growth is our #1 industry, and it is a peninsula. That means we have a finite amount of space in real estate, and we are already way overextended. Our roads cannot handle the numbers that we already had, let alone the numbers that we now have and will have in the future. Our sewage system is older than the incorporation of some of these cities that people are living in here. There's gonna be a time you're gonna come out of your home and you're gonna be in water up to your ankles, and that's just how it's gonna be. Whether it's sea level rise, whether it's income inequality, whether it's cost of living and inflation, whether it's the quality of our leadership, we never get any answers or policies that impact the vast majority of us. It's triage at this point. We're just sort of trying to delay the inevitable.
And the inevitable is?
You're going to have a place where I suppose you could have all oligarchs and nobody else. Now it feels like we will all be alive for a time in which no Cubans live in Little Havana, no Haitians live in Little Haiti, no Bahamians live in Little Bahamas or West Grove, no Dominicans live in Little Santo Domingo of Allapattah. The people who built Miami will not be able to afford to live here.
As the locals who have made Miami what it is continue to be pushed out of town, it's easy to wonder what's being lost.
How have you seen this manifest through the culture of the city? Have you seen more, we talk about new buildings being developed in Miami like crazy.
Well, we're doing a lot more explainers.
Oh, shit. It was in this moment that I realized my own presence here is as good an economic indicator as any that the people who built this city are in danger of being priced out. Because when the fake explainer journalists from New York come to town to make content about your city, that's when you know you are totally fucked. If only there was an appropriate way for me to make it up to the wonderful muchachos of this beautiful endangered urban oasis. Maybe I'll move here. But of course, no investigation was complete without speaking to GoodWorks South Florida real estate correspondent Maya Vander. Maya is a real estate agent and former star of Netflix's Selling Sunset. She used to split her time between LA and Miami, but recently committed to Florida a few years ago to spend more time with her family and ride Miami's luxury real estate wave.
Okay. So you see that? Like I'm just pointing for your B-roll.
Yep. Is there any employees from any particular industry that tend to want to move here?
You will see in general, because the schools are so great, the finance people, attorneys, private equity, hedge funds, but yeah, definitely finance.
How do you see the city evolving with a lot of these newcomers entering in?
I think it's, if you drive around the city, if you drive around Coconut Grove, like they're going to do the Four Seasons right down the street on Bayshore, they're going to start at $3,000 per square foot, which 3 years ago, if you tell someone $3,000 per square foot, they would tell you, no way, Jose. Now those are the prices they are asking, and you know what, they are getting it. I think it's just going to grow from now, and some people cannot afford Miami anymore, and they are moving away from the city.
As always, Maya, you've hit the nail on the fucking head.
I have to ask, was it ever hard to tell Jason and Brett apart?
Never. Gosh, no, I can always tell them apart. And they are great.
I've been sleepless some nights thinking of that.